say goodbye, does Grandpa go to heaven? Does he live with the angels?
Yeah. Grandpa's with the angels.
Well, that certainly got me a little emotional. I've journaled about this a long time ago. But for context, I'm watching General Hospital, which is one of my guilty pleasures. I've been watching General Hospital for years. It used to be like something I would watch with my mom when I was a little girl. And my grandma watched it, so it's like this multi-generational like connection thing with my mom and grandma. And so, I mean, if you're not familiar with General Hospital, it's like a soap opera. But I'm watching it, and it's towards the end of May, and it's this episode is about where Gregory passes away, and his granddaughter comes home from school to not find Gregory. And her father is talking to her about what happened and sort of what follows a death, which is a funeral. And it got me thinking about when I was a little girl, when one of my best friends passed away, and I was in elementary school. Something says second grade, and I know it was before our fifth grade. I know it was before fifth grade because we had our fifth grade graduation, and we all like felt like we saw her in the back row, like so many students. We were like, oh my God, is she here? Is she here? It was like such a freaky thing. It was a very unfortunate situation. Anyway, I didn't get to go to her funeral, and I remember being so mad at my dad. And I remember the abuse had started because I remember being just so angry, like, you're hurting me, life sucks, and then I can't even go to my best friend's funeral. And I remember calling 911 and running out of the house after I did it. But then somehow, I don't know what the situation was, but they actually showed up at the house and was like, what's going on? We got a phone call. I don't even know how that happened. Like, how'd they know where to go? Like, this was in the 90s, so like I'm confused at like how that would have propelled. I don't know. But this episode just hit me, like the father talking to the little girl, how I wish my dad talked to me about this situation. And the gist of it was that my dad was just very controlling and manipulative and didn't care about anybody's feelings but his own, and he thought I was too young to go to a funeral. And I just, to this day, hate that. Like, kids know more than what adults believe they know, and obviously with my abuse, like, I was just growing up at a much faster rate and just realizing more of what suffering is and just making all these connections about life and living, right? And I just, this scene just has got me feeling. Little girl is just like so upset that her grandpa's no longer here, and he's explaining what happens to grandpa. Does he go to heaven? And all these questions, right? But then also what happens to the body. And so he's explaining there's a funeral and there's this process and people get to say goodbye and this is how they grieve. I didn't even get to say goodbye, and I wish my dad would have just like talked to me more about what happens. And instead it was just like this horrible situation. And I remember all of my classmates going. And that was the thing. Right before I called 911, my best friend called me. She lives down the street, and she called me and was like, we're all going. Are you not coming? And I didn't get, like, we just didn't get to go. My twin sister and I, we didn't get to go to the funeral. And I just remember being so mad because the whole class went. I think about that so much. Like, want to go and figure out where. I remember doing research about this a while back. Trying to figure out where she was buried so that I can go pay my respects as an adult the next time I'm in the States. And I don't know, I didn't think about it when I was back I guess it's almost been a whole year now when I was back a year ago, but one of these days I'm going to go to her gravesite and pay my respects, because it's just crazy when you don't get closure or when you don't get to say goodbye, how much that kind of comes up a lot. What the purpose of this is, but I guess if there's an adult watching this and your child goes through a death of a loved one, like, let them go to the funeral. Like, I just really do believe that it builds character and it builds, this ability to understand what happens with death. Like, death is something, I think this is what my father was, he just thought I was too young to understand, or too young to go to a funeral, too young to talk about death. And it's like, death is inevitable, and if you don't start that at a young age and you try to shadow your shadow, and you try to shield your children from death, that is just not going to help them understand death and help them understand living. Death is inevitable, grief is inevitable. These are all big emotions, and they're all big things to process as a child, as an adult. And that all of this when I was a child could have been a teachable moment, or like this very educational moment. And I guess when you are dealing with when you live in an abusive home, like, you just don't even get these experiences, and that just really sucks. I'm not a parent, and I understand, like, we don't want to harm our children more, but to shield them from that is just going to harm them more too. There's got to be some sort of balance. Like, don't not let them go to a funeral. Like, I don't know. Parents chime in here. Like, is there really an age where you shouldn't allow your children to go to a funeral, or is this just going to harm them more? Like, taking me as an adult, like, I think about this a lot, and I don't know. I don't think that that's healthy. Honestly, I think that was one of my, aside from the abuse that I was experiencing as a child and all of that, this was definitely my first, like, negative. This was my first just experience of suffering or pain, or of, like, understanding life aside from the abuse that was happening in my home. Like, I would say that was probably my first big real just other experience. The other one was, I definitely think was, I don't know what grade I was in, but when I was learning about the Holocaust, and I discovered Anne Frank, and I became, like, obsessed with her and the Holocaust and doing all this research. I did this, like, research project, and then even after the research project, I was still, like, trying to know more about the Holocaust and Anne Frank. I'm still sort of obsessed with it. Like, I've been to the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam. I've been to Otto Frank's grave site, because he's actually in Switzerland, which is where I'm living now. A couple of times I've been there now. I don't know, I've just been obsessed with the Frank family, and just, like, the Holocaust and all of that it's just heartbreaking. To just execute people because of who they are is just heartbreaking. So I would say, like, those two things were the two biggest things that happened in my life outside of abuse. And I've kind of been, I would say the last couple of years, I've been thinking about that more. Like, if I just take away abuse, like, there's this exercise that I did several years ago about what love happened in my childhood. Like, where was love? How did I learn about love? And what did love mean to me? And obviously, growing up in a household of abuse, like, love meant harm, love meant abuse, love meant my body being used. Like, love did not mean what it means today with, like, my husband, and just how patient and caring he is. Like, I'm on the complete opposite end, thankfully, and I'm very grateful for that. But I remember several years ago doing this exercise, and it really got me to think about what was the goodness in my life as a child. And, you know, if you pick apart certain memories, I mean, there was a lot of memories that oftentimes the good came with the bad, you know. Oftentimes it was like the bad happened, so then there was good. So like when there was abuse, then my dad would go take me to Sonic, and I'd have a cherry slushy thing, Sonic lemonade or whatever it was called. And I remember those being such a fond memory, but I also remember it just being always after being abused. Or my dad would bring home popcorn at the end of the day after work, but it meant later that night that something was going to happen or whatever, you know. And it was like these memories were always attached to being harmed. And anyway, so several years ago I would try to pick those apart and just kind of find more of the joy, like dancing in the kitchen with my mom, and riding my bike, and rollerblading in the neighborhood, or drinking a soda, like I was gonna say, earning money from my abuse, but then going to Quick Trip and getting a soda. So I had to kind of detach earning the money and the pain. But I remember soaking in like the soda that I bought, or the piece of gum that I bought, or candy bar or something. And I remember we had this field in the back, and like sort of in our backyard towards Quick Trip, and I just remember like walking very slowly to go get that thing that I was gonna go buy, and just like savoring the goodness in life. And I think that's why I am the way that I am in terms of like slow living energy and savoring everything that I can. I don't know. I'm just blabbing. Dang. Sometimes that stuff really gets you thinking. Anyway, I'm gonna stop talking now. This hair needs to dry. Anyway, that's it. Oh, bye.